Welcome to the Be Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Today's episode is a bit different than my usual conversation with bold women. Today I'm chatting with my dear friend Linda Fane about compassion. You might recall Linda from episode 5 of the Be Bold podcast, where we chatted about, among other things, Buddhism. Linda is a longtime Buddhist practitioner as well as a teacher, and she's a personal friend of mine as well. And each time we get together, I can be pretty certain I'll learn some insightful lesson from her. Recently, as you'll hear in this conversation, I had mentioned to her an encounter I had with a friend, and Linda had given me some really wonderful feedback that directly related to the topic of compassion. And it was so helpful for me that I thought, probably listeners might like to hear an episode dedicated to this topic. Before you hear that conversation, just a quick reminder that if you're new to the podcast, I encourage you to go back to previous episodes where I highlight other interesting and courageous women doing extraordinary things. And when you listen to those previous episodes, you'll discover strong women who have overcome adversity. They've started businesses. They've challenged themselves in a variety of ways. They've traveled the world. They've attained status as world-class athletes and given up secure jobs to pursue their dreams and passions. Really a wide range of amazing ladies. You can find all the episodes at BeBoldPodcast.com, or you can subscribe wherever you find your favorite podcasts, and that now includes Spotify. If you like the format of this particular conversation, drop me a line at beth@BeBoldPodcast.com. I'd love to know what you think of this. With that, please enjoy this conversation on compassion with Linda Fane. What I thought would be really interesting, because I've had you on the podcast before, and we had a longer conversation about Buddhism specifically, but we had an encounter recently. You and I had a chat on a walk that we took. And I had explained a situation to you, and you gave me some really wonderful feedback, which I know you won't be able to replicate exactly today, and I can't even replicate it exactly, but I know the feeling that I walked away from. And I thought, you know what, this would be a great episode for a podcast. So today we're going to try something a little bit different, and we'll just do like a little short version, and we're going to talk about compassion. And you're a Buddhist practitioner, you're a Buddhist teacher, and so you'll be coming from it, for the listeners, just so they know, you'll be coming from it from that aspect. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by talking about the event that I mentioned to you, and then you can kind of give me your take on that. We can talk. That'll be a good lead-in for compassion. So sound good? Okay, good. So the experience that happened, the event that happened, was that a friend of mine had contacted me. I knew through Facebook that she was going through a rough time, and I reached out to her and said, hey, just, hope everything's okay there. And she said, I would love to chat, kind of my world's falling apart. I would love to chat with you, can we meet for coffee? And it was a few days before I was leaving on a trip, and the argument could be made that that's all the time, like I'm always ready to leave on a trip. So it's not a good excuse, but I felt pressure because I was getting ready to leave the country, which is a big deal. And I just couldn't get together with her for that, to kind of be the shoulder for her. And I felt bad about it. And I really thought about that. And I thought, Beth, when this person, we're not super close friends, but I just thought, when you have someone in your life, you kind of need to take them warts and all. And I wasn't prepared for her, again, my words, drama. Like I wasn't prepared to kind of take on her drama. I didn't have the energy for it, or the compassion for it, or whatever word you want to put there. So I was feeling kind of bad about that, and that's what I brought up to you. And then it turns out that shortly after that, her world came back together pretty quickly, and things were looking up again well for her. And I knew that again through Facebook, that things were going better. So she made it through without me, which is great. So she went on about her day without me and did quite well. But you had a perspective on that in terms of compassion, and me kind of being hard on myself and kind of questioning how good of a friend I might have been to her. So let's start with kind of that example, and maybe if you can kind of reach back and if you recall what what we talked about that day, and how to approach that situation, maybe specifically that one, but it's just in a general sense for people, how they might approach something like that.
So for compassion, first off, I wanted to say some general things about compassion, because that word is used in different ways. And in a Buddhist context, it's a little different than just a general context. The basis of compassion is empathy. So being able to feel, to reach out and feel what other people are feeling. And that's really an important quality, to empathize. What happens, though, is then, like, we think compassion is taking on other people's suffering. So so we actually see compassion as painful, rather than something that's it's actually a peaceful mind. So in general, empathy is being able to get outside of your own perspective and see another's perspective, and then feel the wish and the desire, may they be free from suffering. That whole activity doesn't take scheduling. It doesn't. It's low impact. That's the essence of compassion, is an internal experience, and it's an internal change where you're shifting a perspective from yours to others, so you can empathize, you can be aware of their pain. Compassion necessarily is based on love. So you have love, and then you are aware of their suffering, and then you have a wish. May they be free from suffering. So that's the essence of compassion. And we can do that anytime. We can do that. So if you're limited in, so then on the flip side, we have varying capacities at different times for helping others in a material way. And time is included in material way. Same with money, time. We have limited capacities, but we have unlimited capacity for internal experience of compassion. So we can expand it. It can be universal, and there's no limits. We don't have limits, but we do currently have capacity limits on material help. So what happens is we get confused. We think, I can't open up my heart because right now I'm about to get on a plane in 3 days, and my capacity for materially helping with time is nil, and therefore I will not open myself up to that person. So then we constrain our incredible potential for universal compassion. We constrain it to what we perceive as our material capacity, and sometimes with even a scarcity mentality. So it's important to develop in the development of compassion, to uncouple compassion, which is love for others, for another, and awareness of their suffering, and then a wish or desire, may they be free from that suffering. That has no limits. So we want to focus on our unlimited potential for compassion and not couple it to our material perceived or otherwise constraints.
That's all well and good, and I appreciate that. But I would say that's not going to help my friend, get back money that she lost, or it's not going to bring back her boyfriend or her husband, or it's not going to change a situation. So, really, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, what good does that do? Because it's not helping her. If I am just saying, oh, good wishes to you, I've got compassion for you, and I'm just doing that all mentally.
There's a couple of thoughts on that. I wanted to kind of address your initial kind of framing of this, is that we need to give ourselves a break and not be hard on ourselves if we can't go beyond our capacity. So it's important to know what we have to give, because frankly, if you had gone to her with that mind of subtle resentment, that would not have been useful. So there wants to be that real openness and shift towards being open to others, and not with that fear or that resentment. So another thing on that track is we need to take care of ourselves. The analogy goes, we consider ourselves like an ambulance, a bodhisattva ambulance. So if we're if we're on the path of a bodhisattva, which is a friend of the world, wanting to become enlightened so that one can be more beneficial to others, your whole life, your body and your material capacity, that's all dedicated to the benefit of all living beings. So you have to take care of it. You have to take care of yourself so that you can give to others, so that you can open yourself up. So so that's what we call, you got to take care of your bodhisattva ambulance. For instance, let's say you had an ambulance driver that's just running, and there's no gas. It's like, oh no, I can't. I don't have time to get gas. That's not looking at the big picture, which is long, sustained development of a capacity to think about others and to help others. The help might be material. It might be spiritual. It's as many depths of help. So that's a side. Now to get to your question about, you just said, what does it matter if you can't actually be there and help them or give them what they need?
Right.
So in the Buddhist context, compassion is beyond, it's more than just empathy. So empathy is, I can feel your pain, I'm aware, I have an ability to change my perspective to get it, to understand what you're going through. Buddhist compassion goes deeper and recognizes that that suffering that you're having has roots. There's karmic roots of that suffering. And there's real deep roots. All of our suffering in a Buddhist context comes from our delusions in our mind. These dark, disturbing mental habits like anger and jealousy and grasping, craving, attachment, even being attached to your own self-cherishing. Oh, poor me. We get into this kind of self-cherishing spiral. So those are delusions in our mind, and those are the root of all of our suffering. So you going over to, so that's a Buddhist perspective. So there's not a delusion that you can solve her problems from that perspective unless you're just talking about temporarily or superficially. Okay, I'm going to bring over some bonbons, and we're going to, watch a movie or whatever. So, we can help people temporarily, but as a Buddhist meditator that understands that all experiences come from mind. Her experiences were not coming from anything outside.
They weren't coming from me. Certainly, yeah.
And so in, to say that, well, that's not helping. Well, neither is, necessarily just
buying her coffee.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's wonderful because more deeply she's getting a connection, but it's not the coffee that's going to make, so it's actually more compassionate to think about helping them having a longer, deeper impact. So, so there's many different approaches depending on where you're at. But so if you're a Buddhist practitioner and you don't have the capacity to help in a material way, think about all the suffering in the world. We are delusional if we think we can relieve the suffering, even a small fraction of it. That's not to say we don't try, but we're delusional if we think that we actually have the power, because we are suffering as well. We're like drowning people trying to save other drowning people. So from a Buddhist perspective, you understand there are root causes of suffering that come from within the mind, and that's why the focus of energy is on developing the mind and developing your own inner strength, your own deep wisdom, so that you can solve your problems on a deeper level. And guess what? Once I can, learn the mechanics of how to oppose my delusions and reduce my jealousy and anger and grasping craving. If I can learn to do that through meditation, through opposing those minds, then the way I can help others is by helping them to recognize, identify, reduce, and eliminate their own delusions. So we have to be skillful about that. So you don't want to go over to someone and say, okay, I'm not going to help you because that's really your own delusions. That's not kind, because if you are thinking of the long view and you're a bodhisattva, that's going to turn them off. It's like, oh my God, Buddhists they're
mean people.
Yeah. So you try to enter the world that someone is in and start where they are. And that's what enlightened beings and Buddhas, enlightened minds that are among us, people that have attained these in high states, they don't go around judging people. It's like, oh, look at those humans that aren't enlightened. They're pathetic. No, that's like, they're dedicating their lives to helping others, so that it's judgment is something that reduces along with increasing love. So we need to look at our judgment and helping other people also. So you don't want to come at it with a judgmental mind, but you do want to recognize that you're, where you can help and where you can't, and just really have a clear view. The best thing we can do is, we could visit, we could listen to them if that's what they need. But in some cases, actually, then you get into this codependency thing where it's like they're in a delusion and we're actually provoking or egging on those delusions. So you want to you have to be skillful and really. And if you're new and you're not skillful, just don't just pull back and really look at your own intentions. I find that if you do anything with a good intention, there's always a good outcome, because that's all you really have control over. So you have a good intention of helping someone, but you don't know exactly how to do it. That intention is powerful and transformative. And sometimes in situations like the world, I can't materially help the whole world, but I can intensify my desire to become enlightened so that I'm able to increase my capacity and impact. So how can I help others reduce the delusions that cause their suffering if I can't even do it myself? And that's why we go inwards as Buddhist meditators with compassion. And to outward more, people that don't understand what's going on, they might say, wow, those people are just meditating when there's so many problems to be solved. That's a delusion, to think that you can solve all of the outward problems rather than going to the root causes and realizing every form of suffering on this realm is caused by minds, caused by poisonous minds. You can look at the news and you can actually catalog which minds, which delusions are causing which sufferings. Environmental degradation is the delusion of attachment and greed, and wars are the root of wars are aversion and anger and deluded pride. So all of these have root minds. You can't. There's no world peace without inner peace. World peace is a world filled with people that have established inner peace in their own minds.
I had a really interesting experience recently, and I've been studying and kind of practicing Buddhism for a long time and a meditator for a long time. And so I intellectually, I know a lot of things. I know a lot of things, right? Not as much as you. But one day I was out for a run and I was thinking, like, just this popped into my head. It's like, Beth, if somebody asked you what stresses you out, I realized the only thing that stresses me out are my thoughts. There is nothing else that stresses me out. It's not that my computer crashed.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I lost my wallet.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that my iPhone won't charge anymore. It's my thoughts around that. And that was like, I've known that. And I've heard those words in a different manner at some point. But for some reason, like, it was just this huge aha moment for me. And so just like reflecting on what you're talking about, that, and actually I hadn't heard of this before, the context that you just put it in, or it's just another little aha for me. Maybe you've said it before, is that even those things such as war and environmental issues, all of that does come down to some sort of thinking. It's it's a thought, and and then it ends up being part of the culture, and it ends up being part of individuals, like
behaviors.
Yes,
come
exactly.
From thoughts.
Right.
There's views, and there's then behaviors that come from that. So the views that we hold directly connect to the behaviors. We're not just human beings whose bodies are moving randomly. Our thoughts are the software, and our bodies are the hardware. Body, speech, and mind, the actions of body, speech, and mind. So if you want to solve problems, you don't just try to, there's an old arcade game called Whack-A-Mole.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know that, where it's like the mole pops his head up and you just hit him, and then you wait for another one to pop up. And, playing Whack-A-Mole, that's not how you're going to solve the mole problem. You've got to look at more the root causes, and Buddha's Four Noble Truths are the method, which is the very first one is no suffering. So it's Four Noble Truths.
No, K-N-O-W.
Yeah,
you have to know suffering.
No, yeah, exactly. No, to know suffering, and then it's abandon origins, and then the third one is attain cessations. And the fourth is by meditating or practicing the path. So to know suffering, to understand suffering, is the first step. So compassion, we think, is just all about, I'm just going to steep myself in a stew of other people's suffering and feel miserable. But that's only the first step, is to know suffering. And that's really, bottom line, get real. Get real.
It's
understand.
recognizing it.
Yeah.
It's recognizing the fact that we all have, there's another shoe is always going to drop.
Yeah,
that something happens, and if something good happens, you'll hear people say kind of like, "Oh, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop," because it kind of does. It always does, because life is not on an upward trajectory of amazing things for the rest of our lives. There's always going to be a downfall of something.
Yeah, and so to know suffering is to know suffering in all the many different versions of it, and specifically to look at the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, death. So it's a cycle: birth, aging, sickness, death, birth, aging, sickness, death, birth, aging, sickness, death. Well, guess what? We've done birth. And then guess what you have to look forward to? The moment you're born, you are racing towards aging. And then you get old and you get sick, and then you get better, and you get sick and get better, and then eventually you won't get better, and then you die. That is the truth. I challenge anybody to tell me it's anything different.
Walt Disney, maybe.
But we don't live that way. I can say that. And actually, I'm teaching on Monday about meditating on death and impermanence. And we really do have to consciously look at it, because our whole society is saying, look away. Look away. Just enjoy, the pleasures of this one life. Don't think about what happens. Don't think about a longer time scale.
Because we have a pill for that.
Yeah,
if you think too much about, as an example, if you think too much about the bad thing that you're putting in your body, you're not feeding yourself properly. If you get sick, then we'll just give you a pill for it.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't worry about that.
Yeah, and if you think about death, so this is, if you meditate on death, you're not really going to care, whatever fill-in-the-blank consumer product that you need, whether you have that or not. So there's a lot of sustaining that delusion that we're not going to die, that feeds our kind of capitalistic material society. But in like the definition of spirituality in Buddhism is thinking about future lives. So you're actually thinking about the impact you have in this life on your spiritual development. It's like, this is an opportunity. have a precious human life, and I have, I have a certain amount of leisure. I have access to Buddhist teachings. I live in a country where you can practice religion or spirituality or any exploratory thought. So if you think that you just, at the end of your life, you're gone, then you might just focus on, the pleasures of this life and see that I'm just going to save for retirement and then, play games or whatever. So it being open to there's a larger time scale helps us to get our priorities kind of straight. And so for compassion, so that was no suffering, to understand suffering. But the second one is abandon origin. So you want to understand suffering so that then you can look, what are the root causes? And abandon origin means I'm going to look at my selfishness, my self-cherishing, my jealousy, my habit of grasping, craving. Those are minds. Just like you said, your thoughts are the only thing that stress you out. Your response to situations. It's not the situations themselves. And we can't control the situations. We can't control the people anyway, but we can control our response. So why not spend your energy on something that you can actually transform your experience? So there's no suffering, abandon origins. So when, in compassion, what we think is may others be free from suffering and its causes. So may that person who's suffering to get food and clean water in some other country, may they be free from that suffering, and also whatever's causing whatever the root causes of that karmically. Like, we don't know what karma we've brought in from our previous life. So we're not blaming people that are suffering. We are all suffering to different degrees. And that's where we can feel connected. We all connected in the suffering. That's why we need to know suffering, abandon origins, attain cessations, which means do the inner work, the meditation to get habitual, to change your habits to more virtuous minds like love and compassion, and reducing our own selfishness by meditating on the path. So the fourth noble truth. So it's like a fourth step. But knowing suffering and compassion is only part of it. So you don't get stuck with, I'm in this stew of suffering. Buddha tells me just to, just stew in this suffering. No, it's about really motivating actions so that you can be a powerful superhero and actually eventually have a power that's unimaginable and transform your own life and to help transform others.
I want to go back to one quick thing, and then I wanted to make this kind of on the short side too. So if there's anything else you want to add, we can talk about that. But there's one thing that I want to talk about just to bring up that I thought was interesting. I have a Facebook group that's called Be Bold. Mm-hmm. And I had just posed a question or posed a kind of a question to people, like if they had a life philosophy. And there was a woman on there who said, my life philosophy in my world and in my business is never be more motivated than the people that I'm working with. And I just thought, well, that doesn't sound very good. I don't know if I agree with that. And I said, wait, what? What are you talking about here? And then she clarified, and she gave these really great examples. And she said, I worked in real estate. I think it was real estate. And I found that when people came to me and they said they wanted to sell their house, that I would go in like guns blazing, all excited, and then realize that they really weren't that interested, and that I had kind of expended all this energy and they really weren't there to, they weren't with me on that. And she said, and then I've noticed that in other things where she might come in, she's a 10 in excitement, and other people, she feels like she's kind of dragging them along. And I think those are more my words, but she's kind of dragging them along. And so it reminded me that just that episode reminded me of what you were saying. You have to use the person's language. Like you have to be compassionate about when you're working with someone, and you can't expect them to have a level of understanding maybe, or a level of enthusiasm or excitement about something when you're approaching it from that aspect, but just be compassionate about how it's approached.
Yeah, you want to be self-aware, have emotional intelligence, and enter their world, because people don't respond well to moralistic, you should do this or you should be like this. No, it's like we all start where we are, And what's really helpful is to just then help people to maybe see something different, see a situation. I mean, that's what we can do with friends when they're in the throes of something. You just say, well, maybe there's a different way of looking at it. Because remember, we just talked about whatever views you have inform your actions of body, speech, and mind. So, and we can't change the situation, but we can change our response to it. And in order to change our response, we have to change our view, or at least be open to another point of view, and then have it see how that feels.
So in the case of my friend, to bring this back to the beginning of the conversation, so let's say in the future, because it will happen again, someone will reach out to me and say, I'm having a crisis and I need your help. And I'm already feeling overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's a prescription for me in responding to that? If I just feel like I can't take on another thing. I've got my bags packed and I'm walking out the door to the airport.
Well, people are at different places with it. What I would do is, it feels horrible to have someone wanting help and you're feeling overwhelmed and I have to say self-absorbed. I mean, I'm focused on myself. That doesn't feel good. So what I would take the time to look at your responses and just become really aware, what's going on here? Why am I resenting her? Because I know, we've all been in that situation where like, okay, they're needy. Then we start attacking them in our mind instead of just looking at our response and saying, what is causing this response? And guess what? You're going to find it has nothing to do with her. It has to do with you. Like there's stress in your mind. Like you said, the only time you feel stress is your thoughts. That's not her fault. So the first thing is really to look at your own internal responses and make sure those don't kind of get in the way of you actually being able to look at it from her side with love and understanding and non-judgment. So judgment gets in the way. So that's where I would start, is to learn about yourself. And I would, from my own experience, your capacity will actually grow, because it's debilitating to be in that guilt. I mean, there's no function of guilt in Buddhism. It's just it's pointless. So you'll actually find your capacity increases when you shift to actually thinking about it from her perspective, rather than focusing on your own poor me. Oh no, I'm like that spiral, kind of internal selfish spiral we go in.
I think that the thing these days, and I'm just making super broad stroke observation here, is that it is so easy for us because, I mean, I've got all my like alerts turned off on like devices and everything, but it's easy to be disturbed by someone, and it's also easy to ignore people because we're getting texts and we're getting Facebook messages and Google chats and Skype calls and all of that stuff. So it's just, it can be, I will fully admit, it's self-preservation for me to turn every alert off so that I'm not disturbed.
But
by
what's your
things.
motivation? What could be a really powerful, positive motivation for turning off those devices?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but I'll try to answer. So if I have those alerts on, I can feel the stress in my body because I feel that I have to immediately respond to people.
Yeah.
So I'm taking it on, thinking even that person may not know that although now, like, you can tell when something's been delivered or when something's been seen, right? Somebody can tell when you've read it. But I just get stressed. And so I have to turn all that off so I'm not distracted. So I'm not stressed and distracted by my other work that I'm trying to focus on.
Yeah. So then just, I think my question is like, going back to the Bodhisattva ambulance analogy, you're realizing your mental ambulance needs gassing. Yeah. And that, so that you can do that rather than having it be like defensive. I need to keep all these needy people away from me. It's like, I want to be able to help these people in a deeper way and in a more sustained way. And I do that by checking out so that we're not doing something and then have that mixed intention.
Not having the resentment.
Yeah. So you can really look at it as a very powerful act of helping others in a deeper, more sustained way.
Do you want to leave it at that? Do you have anything else you want to add?
Next time.
I like that. Yes, till next time.
Okay.
I like that. Yeah, but unless you've got put a bow on something there, but I think that was a nice place to end it.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good. Linda, thanks. Once we finished recording and we're wrapping up, Linda and I were chatting, and she made a comment that I thought was really poignant. She reflected on what I had said about feeling the need to turn off the alerts to all my apps and devices, and she likened it to us all being doctors on call and how we're always expected to be available. And I just thought, man, I do not want to be that doctor, not at all. Thanks again for joining me today. If you like what you heard, don't forget to go back and listen to my extended conversation with Linda on episode 5. Please share this episode with a friend or family member who you think might enjoy it. I'd certainly appreciate that. And also, again, if you like the format of this and just liked us diving in a little bit deeper to a topic, drop me a note, beth@beboldpodcast.com. I'd really appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or Spotify. By subscribing, you're telling your podcast provider that you enjoy this podcast, and that helps to alert others to the podcast as well. So it gives it a little bit more visibility. You can find out more about me by visiting wanderlustandlipstick.com. Sign up for my newsletter on the Wanderlust and Lipstick site, and you'll receive a series of tips for making your travels safer. If you feel like being bold yourself, you can join one of our Wander Tours. We have some spots available on North India. That's later this fall. That's a women-only tour. Africa, and that includes a trek up Kilimanjaro, a Tanzania safari, and gorilla trekking in Rwanda. And that's a co-ed trip. We've got Papua New Guinea this August, as well as a culinary tour to Santa Fe. Just a couple spots left on that. You'll find all of those on wandertours.com. If you'd like to connect with me, you can friend me on Facebook, and I'm WonderGal on Instagram. And finally, the ladies can join us on our Be Bold Facebook group. We've got about 2,500 members in that group. It's where we share goals, we talk about our setbacks, and it's where you can find words of encouragement and inspiration from other women. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Be Bold podcast. Until next time, be bold.